Hello, and welcome to our panel discussion on the Moxy Training Integration Guide. Our panelists today were the primary contributors, editors, and advisors for developing the guide. We have Sandy Musson from Try and Run Sports, Stuart Percival from SunSport Coaching, and Andri Feldmann from Idiag. Let's get started with an introduction from each of our panelists. Can you tell us a bit about your training experience and your experience with Moxy? And why don't we get started with Sandy?
Hi, my name is Sandy, and I am an Ironman and endurance coach. I have always used testing parameters such as lactate, and I came across Moxy in 2013 and became instantly intrigued. I spent quite a bit of time speaking with Roger and with Idiag Feldmann and Andri Feldmann, and totally fell in love with the idea of oxygen usage as a method of assessing and training my clients. So I've been using it with multiple clients since 2013.
Great, thanks. How about you, Stuart?
Hi, yeah, my name's Stu Percival, and I'm based here in the UK, in Manchester. I run a sports performance assessment and coaching business. We have a lab here in Manchester where we assess athletes across a range of abilities and across different types of sports, endurance sports. So we work in the lab quite hard with our athletes, and we coach guys in the UK and throughout the world. We first integrated Moxy just over 12 months ago, back in June 2016. Until that point, we just used to use, which we still use, the same equipment, traditional stuff like CPET, VO2, lactate testing. But we were always looking to kind of pioneer new ways, and we came about the Moxy, and it's been a bit of a game changer for us, which I think we're going to speak about. It's really added value to what we do in the lab when we assess our athletes, help with our remote coaching, and some field testing. So it's been a fantastic bit of kit, really.
All right, great. How about Andri?
Yeah, thanks, Roger. Thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Sandy. So I come at it from a little bit more the academic side. I used NIRS in my master's work, and I'm doing a PhD now also where I'm using NIRS, specifically the Moxy. So I was actually I did some conceptual development things with Roger while the Moxy was still in prototype, and with the release of the Moxy 2, just ideas of application in training. I work generally with coaches and a wide range of athletes, world-class to amateur, where I do consultancy work on how to train in general, but also specifically with NIRS and with the Moxy.
All right, thank you for the introductions there. Our first question is, what is your approach to integrating muscle oxygen monitoring into your training system? Maybe Stuart, you could start us off on that one.
Yeah, so like I say, we started using the Moxy just over 12 months ago, and initially we thought it just kind of add value to what we were doing originally, which was more traditional assessments, VO2, oxygen uptake, VO2 max, those sorts of things that people are more familiar with, lactate testing, the kind of things people ask for when they contact us and they're trying to improve the performance. And quite quickly it became apparent that actually the kit is, it can be used by itself and add value to them, and we've gone off in some new directions really in how we actually assess athletes in the lab, and the Moxy's given us some, NIRS technology, as Andre says, gives us some insights that you can't really get from that equipment alone, I don't think, and it's really changed the way we approach assessing athletes, and then how we work with them afterwards and how we prescribe training. It's changed how we do things, and the way we've integrated it really is we use it in the lab to assess all our athletes now, and we're also using it work with them remotely. So it's allowed us to take kind of the lab into the field and get some data that we never ever used to be able to get. So we're basically able to learn a lot more about the athlete in the lab and do some quite dynamic, unique things outside of the lab which we were never able to do, and it's really helped us move their performance on, and it's been fantastic for us as a company, really.
Okay, Andri or Sandy, do you have something to add to that?
The way I integrated it into my coaching was, like I said, I was assessing people using lactate, and I was looking for something that would take over that assessment. But because I got on to it very early on in its inception, there was a huge learning curve, which Jurg and Andri helped me with quite a bit. But I really think what it helped me with the most was getting out of the rigid box of, these are your training zones, you must follow them no matter what. And it really allowed myself and my athletes to play with their training a little bit more and test themselves in individual workouts to see what they were capable of doing beyond those rigids, here's your zone 1, here's your zone 2. I feel like it's given my athletes autonomy. So initially all I was using it for was assessing them, and then I had a number of my clients purchase their own Moxy. So I coach 14 people, some close, some far away, that all have their own Moxy, and I really feel that it's brought a real quality to their training, that they're totally invested in it. It's not just, here's your workout, go do it, and we wait until the next testing day or the next race day to see whether their training has worked. They get to see that on a daily basis, and they really feel like they belong to their training and it belongs to them, as opposed to just something that they have to go and do and report on.
On that, so I think Sandy talks about it perfectly. So this is really, when we talk about how to integrate this into your, in general, I tell people just to play around with Moxy, but I think the best approach to integrating the Moxy is really, if you do some kind of testing, you just take the Moxy and you add it into the testing that you're doing. Because then you're in an area where you're comfortable, and you just have a new parameter that you need to look at, okay? And if you're doing VO2 or if you're doing lactate, whatever testing you're doing, you'll pretty quickly realize how valuable the Moxy becomes and the muscle oxygen parameter becomes, because it does what you would expect it to do, and it creates a lot of information additionally to what the lactate curves would give you. And there's a lot of things that happen the same and some things that happen differently. Once you've done that, that's the mini step. That gets you in the first step into the door of what the Moxy is supposed to give you. And the next step is exactly that which Sandy pointed out. You now have a tool that you feel can do your testing for you, okay? Just like your lactate and just like your VO2, okay? The difference, though, is you don't need to use a surrogate like heart rate or power or something like that. I mean, still use power, but you don't need to use a direct surrogate. You can use the tool that you're using in your testing for your training. Okay, you don't do that with VO2, and you generally don't do that with lactate. You just have some kind of zoning scheme that Sandy points out, which becomes very rigid, and then you just follow that based on, for example, heart rate zones, even though heart rate wasn't the relevant parameter. It was lactate or VO2, but you can't measure that. Muscle oxygenation and the Moxy changes that. You can actually use the same parameter that you feel is important with testing in the training. And it really actually combines. It goes the step where in many ways your training is testing and your testing is training, because it's giving you the same parameter that you are interested in. And the future of this is really moving into a data collection, gathering, data tracking system physiologically, and it's not like I have a test day twice a year. No, you're actually tracking data the whole time, and you're looking at what's happening physiologically, and that's what I feel is very exciting.
All right, great insights, everyone. I'm going to move on to the next question here. How does this approach compare to other approaches like the lactate, like the VO2? I think you guys have kind of started on this already. And maybe even talk a little bit about some of the other approaches that other people have tried with NIRS or are looking at trying. I think we're seeing a lot of people look at using NIRS as a replacement for lactate threshold testing. And maybe you could talk about how you've integrated Moxy compared to how some of these other approaches have looked at either using other measurements like VO2 or lactate or actually other NIRS approaches.
I use primarily Moxy now. I use oxygen all the time. As Andri said, I use heart rate, pace, wattage as just kind of an interesting byproduct of what we're seeing on a daily basis with oxygen consumption. So that's, I do what Andri had suggested, where my clients will do their normal, using their normal parameters when they first start to use it and notice oxygen, and then eventually after 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, we flip it, and it becomes oxygen becomes the driver, and the other parameters become the interesting side note. I'm not sure I can speak intelligently about the other companies with NIRS. That may be more in Andri's area of expertise.
Oh, so I can quickly jump in. So about how does this approach compare to other approaches? So I'm assuming we talk about a different, some kind of assessment or analysis to doing of performance, and then trying to implement some kind of training. I think philosophically it's not that much different than using other parameters, because you're just measuring something physiologically which you hope is going to give you information as to how to train and where your performance is at. So I don't think it's philosophically different. The approach that becomes different is because of the type of technology it is. Again, it becomes much more, it's much easier to use in many ways. So retesting becomes much easier, and using it in your training. I mean, you could retest, an athlete can retest themselves every week with the Moxy if they wanted to. It's not such a big deal to do. You can talk about if it makes sense or not, but not a lot of athletes can or will or want to retest a lactate test every week or a VO2 test in a lab. It's not feasible. So the approach changes in the availability of gathering the data, I would say. Or at least that's a big part of an approach change that people can consider.
Yeah. For me, we have our performance lab here in Manchester, and I think one of the great things about the lab is you've got the athlete there, you can really control everything really well, and sort of control the intensity and get lots of great data. It's a very sterile environment, and then, like Andri says, it's a one-off half day. Then they go away and they do some training based on what you found and what you prescribed. Which, it's been effective in the past. There's nothing wrong with that, and we still do that. But what we've got now is a way of just continually monitoring that athlete, and that for me is the big thing really. Not only does it add value to the lab when we're in there, and throws up some more exciting questions and ideas for us to try with that athlete. We can sort of continually monitor them remotely without having to see them and have a half day every so often, which we still do. We're not going to move away from that. But I think for me, and the other big thing is as well is the lab is great, but it's sterile. When you take someone off the exercise bike and put them in a race, for example, or some other situation where they're under pressure exercising, things change, and it's much better to have that direct feedback while they're doing that. So having that lab capability in the field is the big thing for me, because it gives you information you just don't get in the lab, and so it's a great piece of kit for that.
All right, thank you. Moving on here, with the creation of this training integration guide, how is that going to make things better for coaches? I think all three of you definitely got into this early. when a lot of these things were just being developed, and you helped to develop them as well. What do you see that the training integration guide will help for coaches that are just getting started with this?
Yeah, I think the team that's here today, and there's a couple of others that aren't here, have worked really hard to produce something that I think's going to really help bring other people up to speed quicker. And that's what we need, really, is more great minds like the ones here today that are going to help us develop our ideas further and come up with some new great ideas and methodologies for assessing people. And that, for me, is the exciting thing about Moxy. Here in Manchester, we're quite sort of open-minded, and we like to pioneer new ideas and try things out. We don't just sort of follow what everybody else does. So it's great when we get involved with Sandy and Andre and the other guys, and they come up with these great ideas. And the more data we collect and the more coaches we get on board, the better the technology will get. And everybody gains. The performance of the athlete will be, will go through the roof. So it's great to have that, and the guide will really help fast track those coaches up to our position fairly quickly, I should hope.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the integration guide is going to make a complicated concept easier to understand for the average coach so that they can get up to speed quickly and use it effectively and see some really good results with their athletes that will maybe help them to expand their knowledge base even beyond what we're teaching in the integration guide, like just have them learn more about respiration and how that affects workouts and recovery and stuff like that. So I really do think that the integration guide takes a lot of really good solid science and data and makes it a little bit easier to digest in smaller, easy to understand chunks of information.
Yeah, I think for me, what I think the training integration guide will do is it'll have a calming effect.
Yeah, good word.
a calming effect on when people start with Moxy. It's something that I'm always really happy with people like Sandy and Stuart, because I get lost a lot of the times in kind of, let's call it, my own world. If you can't communicate the information that you feel that you have, you're going to have trouble. And I think the training integration guide is a good way of trying to get that done. So when you get a Moxy and you get this new parameter, and sometimes it can be a little overwhelming, especially if you people who dig into the forum and they look at what my dad's writing about. There's a lot of information there with a lot of experience compacted down, and that can be a little nerve-wracking. So that's why I say it could have a calming effect, that it's going to calm you down, bring you back. Okay, what is the simplest breakdown? And we're going to build up a foundation of what you're actually interacting with.
All right. Thanks for that. The next question, how has your view of Moxy as a daily training tool evolved over time? I think we've touched on this a little bit. I think early on Moxy was viewed primarily as an assessment tool, and I think we're seeing that where the real breakout is in this daily training opportunity. So maybe you guys could comment a little bit further on using Moxy as a daily training tool.
Yeah, I agree totally with that. When I first got it, all I used it for was assessments, and now, unless I have a client that doesn't have their own, and I am using it to find zones, my other athletes, I rarely assess them. They use their Moxys on a daily basis, and like we've discussed here, you're getting all of that data daily, so the need to assess is not there unless there's something that we're seeing that is way out of the ordinary that we want to dig into a little bit more. So the daily use of it has become instrumental in my coaching.
Yeah, I agree there with Sandy. We use the Moxy a lot in the lab. We do a lot of assessing of athletes, which is great. We love doing that stuff, but most of the time, obviously, they're doing their own training remotely from you. We don't stand next to them when they're doing it. So after the lab, with technology nowadays, you do get a steady stream of data. It's great. Well, I think Andri touched on it before. They don't have a mask attached to the face while they're always training. They're not having blood samples taken continually. But what we've got now is we're moving into the field with it, and we're training guys dynamically, and dictating changes in their week just based on Moxy data and the racing with it and things like that. So yeah, we can make some decisions based on some biofeedback, which is how we're using it at the moment. And next spring 2018, we're going out to Mallorca, and we're going to actually have that live data feeding back whilst we're riding with the guys. So it's opened up some great new avenues for assessing and coaching athletes for us.
Any thoughts on this one, Andri?
No, I think Stuart and Sandy covered it pretty good. I'm not sure if I try to think back when I started with Moxy, if I think that my view has changed. So I think from the beginning, I've always thought that the potential of Moxy is in its daily use. I guess what has more evolved is like the feasibility that it is happening and people are using it daily. Where at the beginning it was more about, okay, yes, I think that's where the strength lies, but how long or how are people going to react to that suggestion? And I feel with people like Sansa, where it's really like, yeah, it's feasible and people are using it, and it seems to be working, and it's a good tool to have. I think that's the biggest evolution that I've kind of followed in the last 5 years.
Okay. Well, that's kind of a good segue into our next question. How practical has it become to use this data with a large number of clients? I think Sandy she was doing some pretty heroic data acrobatics early on to use this with her athletes, but I think that's got better over time. Maybe you guys could comment on how you manage this stream of data.
Yeah, I think with the integration into Training Peaks to be able to see the graphs, it has become exponentially easier to deal with data. As you said, when I first started, I would get daily uploads from my clients and have to create graphs and then assess them and then send them back. And now it's as simple as I can look at their Training Peaks account, pull the graph up, see it directly related to the workout that was assigned and the other parameters that the other data that they've gathered, like speed or temperature, cadence, anything that they've gathered in their Training Peaks, and able to comment directly to that, take a snapshot of it, post it on to their individual workout, and make my comments right there. So it has been a huge time saver. And I would say the only thing I would like to see different, and this is on the Training Peaks end, is the ability to manipulate the graphs, as we've discussed with them. And also, it would be great if somebody could see those graphs in a basic account. And I know why they don't do it, but maybe they would consider allowing a client to have the use of like one graph for free, and then we could make it our Moxy graphs. And then if a client could do the same thing and create their graph and see it instantaneously, that would be the next step. That would be huge.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything Sandy said there. I think it's come on leaps and bounds the last few months with Garmin and Training Peaks, and we just need that seamless data back to us fairly quickly. It's quite labour intensive coaching athletes as it is, so we don't want to be creating lots of graphs. And but I'll give you a practical example. We've invested in a demo Moxy that we send out to our athletes just to maybe show them how good the technology is, and they might want to buy into it, but also we just give it them for, say, 4 to 6 weeks, get a couple of tests in, some training data, and just get that feedback to help with their training. And I sent mine to to a guy in Switzerland just 3 days ago, and I got busy and didn't. I actually missed a Skype with him, but I was going to explain how to put the Moxy on, how to link it up to his Garmin and things, and get the good data coming through. And the next day he'd already done it himself. He'd gone on your website and watched the video. So he'd done his usual power-based training, and the Moxy data was in there, and I hadn't even spoken to him. It was like really eye-opening just to see, perhaps sometimes why he doesn't complete the intervals, or, some changes already instantly what we need to make, and he just only had the Moxy like 48 hours. So it was incredible, the turnaround to seeing this data and opening up some new insights into what we need to do with him almost immediately. It was great.
All right, Andri, any comments on this?
I'm thinking about it. So I think Sandy and Stuart make really good points. I think the Moxy's come a long way, and it still has a long way to go. So I think that there's a lot, when we talk about real user friendliness, I think in many ways there's still a lot of steps that need to be made, but it has improved significantly. And I really think that if you compare it to a few years ago, it is now more at the point where I can say, yes, you as an end user can get a Moxy and really get the benefits from it. Whereas a couple of years ago, I said, well, yeah, there's the benefit, but it's going to take you a lot more hoops to jump through to get there. And I think all the things that Roger has done with Garmin, with training keeps, it's really, it's taken a lot of those hoops away to get it as a practical device for an end user, especially not just as a testing device, but as a daily monitoring tool.
Okay, very good. Well, we plan to continue to push forward on all of those fronts. We've got ongoing relationships with Garmin and Training Peaks and several other companies. So definitely this is something that has come a long way, and we plan to keep it moving forward as well. So and input from trainers like you guys really helps make that happen. So thank you for all of the input on that. So this is our last question here for the discussion. And so looking forward, how do you see things, how do you see the future, and how do you see your own future with using the technology with your clients?
I'll jump in here because I think I said earlier it's been a bit of a game changer for SunSport coaching. So we've integrated it quite a lot, and I wouldn't say we rely on it, but I already don't want to see a new athlete and not get the Moxys on them. So it's certainly going to be, an integral part of the equipment we use in the lab and in the field, and hopefully our athletes will buy them and we'll get that data back from them. And I think as a business, we're always looking to pioneer new methods and try new things, and the Moxys open lots of doors for us to do that. And I think from next year we're going to be doing some things out in the field and we're trying to get lots of wearable tech out into the field and assess athletes whilst they're racing and training, getting that biofeedback. Almost what you get in the lab, but in the field, and the Moxy's kind of the centre of that. So we're hoping to produce some super athletes on the back of this. So maybe watch this space.
For me, when you and I spoke back in 2013, originally, Roger, you said your vision for Moxy was to get one on every athlete, just like a heart rate monitor. And I kind of follow along with that as I've used it with more and more clients. With the type of training that I do, I see that it reduces injuries and illness and makes my athletes happier, and they achieve their goals in shorter periods of time. And I really do try and encourage all of my athletes to purchase one, or at least use one, try it. We do have one that we'll loan out for people so that they can see it. And that's kind of the direction that I would like to see it go, kind of like a heart rate monitor or a Garmin. Everyone has one.
Yeah, so I agree with everything Sandy and Stuart said, so I'm going to comment on something different so I don't repeat what's already been said. I think in many ways a vision for the future with the technology, because the technology in its essence, it offers something very simple but also something very complex. Physiology is complex, but an SMO2 trending information doesn't need to be that complex. So I think the vision of the future is really that you're able to separate between populations that are going to use the Moxy. So you need to be able to provide a path for a complicated physiological application of the Moxy, you know, very intense testing protocols where you're trying to figure out everything as much as you can, integrating all the possibilities that mirrors can offer with maybe, you know, other tools. But you also need to have, at the same time, I feel we have a lot of that. We need at the same time break it down even more. So it becomes what Sandy said about this heart rate monitor for everyone. And for that, there needs to be even simpler than what we have it in the integration guide, like a little more of a breakdown to really get it into, oh yeah, this is really easy for me to use. Because I do think that potential is there as well.
All right, that's the end of our questions. I don't know if anyone has any closing comments they'd like to make. I certainly want to thank you guys for your contribution to the training integration guide and in developing the technology that went into that and the training methods that went into that. It's immensely valuable, and we really appreciate that. And thank you also for participating in the discussion today.